G'day guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Sean and I make videos about technology, and today we're looking at this gaming laptop from Gigabyte, the Gigabyte Aorus 15Xa gaming laptop. If you found this video helpful, chuck a like, get subscribed, and if you want to follow me on social media, I'll leave links to that down below as long as my Discord server. And if you want to, you can also catch me on live streams every Thursday and Saturday. So now that's all said and done, let's begin. So guys, as mentioned, this gaming laptop from Gigabyte you unfortunately cannot buy anymore, but I am going to hopefully explain why this is a good thing and what changes Gigabyte has made on the next models or the future models that I think is going to be good for you, the customer. This gaming laptop has a RTX 2070 graphics card, which is not the Q model or the super model. It is the proper desktop RTX 2070. It has an i7 6-core 12-thread CPU, 16 gigs of RAM, 512 gig SSD, 2 terabyte hard drive. It is a proper gaming laptop. And then with the screen, you've got a 240 hertz sharp display. So this is a proper gaming laptop. This is not the laptop that you're gonna get a lot of productivity work done. You're not gonna be sitting out in the park for 8 or 10 hours because the battery life is just not going to last that long. This is a laptop for you, for those of you who are gamers and gamers at heart and want to have the best of the best in as small and as portable package as possible. And so Gigabyte has basically got all the best components and somehow managed to pack it all in this laptop and tried to keep it cool. Now, after doing a bit of research and digging around online to find some computer shops that may have stocked this once upon a time, they were selling this particular one for about $3,500. And I guess for the specs that you're getting for this particular model anyway, that's pretty reasonable, because if you try to build a computer yourself with, I guess, equivalent parts, you're probably going to be looking at around about the $3,000 mark. So before I get to the performance and the thermals and all that kind of stuff, which I know you guys want, let's just quickly go through so I can show you the I/O and the design of the laptop. All right, so now in terms of I/O, on the left-hand side here, you've got a couple LED indicators for your battery and hard drive. You've got a micro SD card reader, a Type A USB 3 port, and also a Gigabit Ethernet. So on the right-hand side, you've got a headphone microphone combo jack, 2 USB 3 Type A's. And then on the back side, we've got here an option for a Kensington lock, so that way no one steals your laptop, a USB Type-C, USB 3 port, and then we've also got a display port, mini display port, full-size HDMI, and then obviously we've got a DC jack for charging the battery and providing power. So on the back side of the screen, you've got here, some little cutouts for the Aorus design, which actually do glow up, but they're not changeable. They're just a simple white light. And then spinning it around onto the side here and on the back, you've got plenty of ventilation, which I actually think it looks quite nice. It's kind of reminiscent of what you might see on like on a car's grille, like on one of the Lamborghinis or something like that. You've got these angled vents, tons and tons of vents all around the side. And then on the bottom of the laptop as well, if I spin that around, you've got even more vents. So you can probably see here on the camera, you've got a fan here on the left and right side, and pretty much under light, you can see that it's basically got as much I guess, allowance for airflow as possible, just to try and keep those components cool. Then we've also got some rubber feet here as well, so that's going to keep it slightly elevated off the desk, so that way, even if you do have it on something like a mouse pad or something like that, or a desk, you're still going to get some sort of elevation for the fans to sort of suck in and circulate some cool air. Now with the keyboard, you've got here a full-size keyboard. These are just membrane keys, but they are RGB backlit and they are addressable. So using the Gigabyte Control Center software, you can go ahead and change the colors here. You've got your power button with the Aorus logo up at the top there, right in the center. You've obviously got some upwards facing speakers, and these are the little cutouts for the speakers there. And then you've got your multimedia and function keys along the top, with a maximum fan speed button, which we'll talk about a little bit later. The actual stickers on here as well, it does talk about some of the different components from Samsung, Sharp, NVIDIA. It also has Microsoft Azure AI, and I'll talk about that a little bit in a second. And then obviously the main, I guess, highlight, or one of the main highlights, is the display. This is a 1080p 1920 by 1080 I guess TN panel, 240 hertz, manufactured by Sharp, which is absolutely awesome, but this is not a G-Sync panel. Now the trackpad is there. It's quite wide, which is good, but it's not that deep, which I mean, if you are wanting to do some work, I mean, at least they obviously put a trackpad into it, although most of you are going to be using this with a dedicated mouse. Same goes with the webcam and microphone. It is there, so if you do want to do the occasional Skype call, or you want to do something, you know, with a web conference or a meeting or something like that, you can get that done, but it's not going to be anything that you would want to use for like live streaming, and it doesn't have Windows Hello facial recognition either. So it's more or less they've included it just because it's more of a convenient thing, not because you're expected or going to be using it all the time. Now for charging the laptop, you've got this absolutely humongous laptop charger with a big fat, I guess, DC jack on the end of it. It doesn't actually mention on here how many watts it's providing, but you can see it's got 19 volts, 11.8 amps, but this is quite big and heavy. I'd probably say that this is around about 500 or 600 grams. So when you add that together with a laptop that's a few kilos, it's definitely going to be something that you can take with you, but you're not going to be, you know, lugging this to and from, or I wouldn't recommend it going to and from the office. This is going to be either for those of you who are hardcore gamers, or maybe you're professional, you're a professional who want to do some 3D rendering or some CAD work. This can be a good piece of kit to carry with you. All right, so before we get into the gaming and the frames per second and the thermals and all that kind of stuff, I just want to quickly talk about the Aorus Control Center. So this is a piece of software that is available from the Gigabyte website. And basically what it'll give you is a bunch of hardware information, and then also the manager, which you can go ahead and control certain parts of the computer. And then also you've got here the fusion element, which is for the lighting, and then some smart utilities there as well. So on this Aorus Control Center screen, you can see that we've got our Intel SSD, the 512 gig one. This is an NVMe drive. We've got the 2 terabyte Seagate hard drive. You can see here the CPU and also the GPU, and then we've got our battery health information, as well as the fan speeds for fan 1 and fan 2. Currently at the moment, it gives us also along the top here some different graphs that show us, I guess, how much of the hard drive is used, how much our memory is in use, GPU and CPU. If we go over to app shortcuts, we can add launchers here for, you know, frequently used apps or games. Under the manager here, you can go ahead and, I guess, if you want to control the brightness manually using the, I guess, software, you can do that. You've got an option for max fan, LCD monitor switch, high performance balance or power saver if you want to go ahead and switch modes, turn Bluetooth on and off, Wi-Fi on and off, touchpad on and off, the blue light killer, which I've got turned on, which I actually find quite helpful. And then a couple other things like calculator, you know, killer optimizer, which is a network utility. And then going over to Fusion, you can go ahead and change the color of the keyboard. So for example, if we want to make it red, or if you want the little corners of the laptop, which have some little LED elements, to be red, we can do that. If we want to change it to, you know, blinking mode, we can go ahead and do that. Maybe we'll make it pink, for example. So we can just go ahead and slide this around, and, you know, you can manually turn on the keyboard or turn that off if that's what you want to do. So you've got some options there, and you can also turn off the lighting on the back side of the screen if you want to do that. The smart utilities, this is just where you can go to find out whether or not you've got the latest drivers and I guess firmware for different things like the BIOS or for the control center. And then you've got this AI gaming here as well. So if you want to go ahead and use that, you can turn that on and off. So this is a handy little application, especially for one thing that I use quite a bit, which was the fan control. The fans on these, the fans in this particular laptop do get quite loud when it is under load. So I'm just going to turn on the fan for max speed, just so you can hear that for a few seconds. So as you can see there, with the fan set to their max speed, they get up to around about 7,000 RPM, which is quite a bit, and they do produce a bit of noise, but that's obviously to try and keep everything as cool as possible. When it's just sort of idling, it's noticeable, but it's not bothering me too much. They only sit around about 3,500 RPM, but under full load, I would definitely recommend using this gaming laptop with a pair of headphones. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to load up 4 different games. I'm going to load up Doom, Apex Legends, Call of Duty, and Fortnite, just so you can see what kind of performance and thermals that you will get on this laptop, and whether or not the 240 Hertz display is justifiable. Alrighty, so we're currently in Doom, and as you can see on the screen, we've got our metrics up for the GPU, CPU, the RAM, and also the video RAM. And you can see that at the moment at 1080p, we get anywhere from, I guess up to 200 frames. If we're looking straight down on the floor, this game is capped at 200 frames per second. But then if we go out, for example, onto this little ledge here, it drops right down to about 80 or I guess 90 frames per second. You can see the temperatures as well. We're in the high 80s to 90 degrees. And the CPU can boost up to 4 gigahertz, but it does drop down to around about 3.8, 3.5, 3.7, but the GPU is probably the thing that takes the biggest hit. Normally it's boosting up to around about 1350 megahertz, but at the moment we're down to around about 1200 megahertz. So there is definitely a noticeable performance hit because of the thermals. And even on a game, like if we go into the settings here within Doom itself, we can see we've got all the vertical sync and anti-aliasing turned off. And then in the advanced area, we've got everything set to low and turn off everything as much as possible. The saving grace is that this screen does look really, really good, and the 240 Hertz panel is able to keep up, obviously no problems, which does make for a really immersive gaming experience. But because it can't even get to, I guess, over 200 frames or even closer to 100 frames consistently, I don't really feel like the 240 Hertz screen is really that justifiable. So let's go ahead and switch over to something like Fortnite, and we'll see how that game runs. Alright, so even though I don't play this game, I know a lot of you do. This is Fortnite, and if we go into the settings here, you can see we've got unlimited frames per second, 1920 by 1080, and everything set to basically off. We're running DirectX 11, and we've got the multi-threaded rendering turned on. So as you can see in this game, which is not capped to 200 frames, we can see it does get up to around about 190 frames looking directly down at the ground, but then once we start running around, we're getting around about 110 to 120 frames in environments where there is a bit of action going on. So we're now in the bus here, 150, 160 frames, which is nothing to scoff at, but if you've got a 240 Hertz screen, you would at least like to see the hardware able to utilize every possible frame within a game, especially with the fact that we've got all of the game settings turned basically all the way down to 0. As you can see now, we're looking basically straight down at the ground, and we're getting around about 270 frames, and everything is buttery smooth, which is nice. But then once we run into like a village or something like that, it's dropping down to about 170 frames per second, which thankfully that this screen is only 15 inches, and that even with the settings set all the way down to low, it still makes for a really great competitive gaming laptop. So for some of you, you may not think that this is a bad thing, but I think maybe that this laptop would have been better with a 144 Hertz screen instead of a 240 Hertz, because you can see that it sometimes, I guess, dips from 200 down to 100 and then back up again, depending on the thermals of the laptop. So it's kind of a bit all over the place. And we got a kill. Never happens. I promise I don't play this game. And we got another kill. I don't even understand. Alright, so let's go and play something else that I actually enjoy, like Call of Duty, and we'll see how that game runs. Alright, so we're in Call of Duty right now. We're loading up the multiplayer. You can see that this game is running DirectX 12. And if we go into the options here for the graphics, we've got basically everything set to a mix of normal. We've got ray tracing turned on. Just because it has that option, I thought you guys would like to see that. So we're not pushing it in terms of, we haven't got everything set to ultra settings, just a mix of normal and low settings. So, you know, in the loading screen, you can see we're getting around about 90 frames per second. Let's see what we get when we're actually in the game. Alright, so in Call of Duty you can see us looking down straight at the ground. We're only getting up to 115, 120 frames per second. The GPU and CPU are both still in the 80s and I guess high 80s and 90 degrees Celsius. It's worth mentioning as well, the ambient temperature in the room right now says it's about 23 degrees Celsius. So it is nice and cool in here. So giving the laptop every possible chance to perform well. So it still feels like a good game to play on a laptop, even with this screen not really being pushed at all by the game. But you know, is there a justification for 240 hertz on this kind of computer with this kind of hardware? Not if you can cool it properly. That's my personal opinion. I think it would be better to have maybe something like an RTX 2060 and a 144 hertz screen. Maybe it will make it a bit cheaper, and also I guess it would make a little bit more sense having that sort of pairing that graphic card with that kind of screen. One other thing that I would say as well is that the actual keyboard, the membrane keyboard, doesn't sound too bad. Sorry, it doesn't sound too bad. It doesn't actually feel too bad. The fact that it is RGB means you can see it, you know, in low light situations or at nighttime. If that's something that you want to do, you want to game at night. But the fans are quite loud. So like, I wouldn't recommend playing any sort of game, especially like a game that requires you to be able to focus in on people's footsteps without having a pair of headphones. So just something worth considering or mentioning as well. So let's jump into our last game, Apex Legends, and see how that one performs. Alright, so we're in Apex Legends, and if we go into the settings here, you can see we've got it's set to 1920 by 1080. I didn't realize these settings were all set to high, so let me turn them all down to low, because this is quite a, I guess, competitive game, which, I mean, you want to get as many frames per second as possible. So we're going to turn everything down, leave the VRAM set to 8 gig. We'll turn off VSync as well, and we'll see now when we're flying in, we're getting around about 75, 60 frames per second, which is, you know, it's a reasonable amount because you're loading in quite a big map, a lot of textures, you know. But then once we're on the ground here, it's not really boosting up that much. It's boosting up to around about 100 frames per second. GPU is, you know, in the 90s now. CPU is in the 95, 96 degree mark. So this game is obviously putting a lot more load on than what we've seen with other games. It does, again, feel really good because this screen means that you're not going to ever get any screen tearing or anything like that, which for some people is going to be perfectly fine. Indoors, you can see that the frames did jump up there for a split second to around about, you know, 120, 150 frames per second. That's just because we're not loading very much of the map. If we're looking, you know, straight at the wall or straight down to the floor, you know, we can see we almost hit 200 frames per second. We're getting about 190, 195 frames per second. But if we go ahead and we actually, you know, move around and we actually play the game, we go outside, you know, we look at other things, you're going to be hovering anywhere between 90 and 100 frames per second. You get those occasional moments where it does, you know, boost up a little bit more, but overall, it's actually not getting anywhere even close to 144 consistently, which for an RTX 2070 paired up with a 6-core 12-thread CPU, I mean, I don't think it's unreasonable to try and expect that, especially when, you know, they've got a 240 hertz display. It's kind of selling you the impression that it can perform up to that sort of standard. So let's just run around for a second and see if we can find someone to kill. Probably not going to last that long. One of our guys has already died, but that way at least you get to see the performance metrics just for a little bit longer and decide whether or not, I mean, Is this screen and this combo in a laptop a good thing? I mean, I'll leave that up for you to decide. I've already told you what I think. Let me know what you think, guys, down in the comments. Alrighty guys, so let me finish up this game of Apex, and we'll basically leave it there in terms of performance in games. We've done the 4 main games that I think you guys are probably going to want to see. That's going to give you a bit of a broad idea or spectrum of, you know, different games, different platforms, some of them using DirectX 11, some of them using DirectX 12. And you can see that between all of the games, you know, you're going to get between, I guess, 70, 80 frames per second up to, you know, 150, 160. But it's never going to be consistently on any game that I've played anyway, above 200. Alright, so to basically summarize this video, I would say that this laptop has amazing performance, amazing screen, amazing parts, but the thing that is lacking is the cooling. Now, the reason why I said make sure you watch until the end of this video is that from what I've seen from Gigabyte's website and from some of the Gigabyte resellers, you can now get for around about $3,500 this same spec laptop with the same CPU and the same GPU in a 17-inch form factor, still with a 240Hz screen. And I feel like the reason why they've done that is so that with a 17-inch laptop, you've got obviously more room to fit more cooling components in. So I'm going to be reaching out to Gigabyte after this video to see if they want to send over that particular model so I can check it out. But you can pick up a Aorus laptop with something like an RTX 2060 or a 1650 with a 144Hz screen in a 15-inch form factor, which I feel actually makes a lot more sense. And that laptop comes in at around about $2,500. So, you know, you're saving a whole $1,000 by going down to a more reasonable graphic card with a 144Hz screen. But if you do want to splash out on something that is over $3,000, then you've got the 17-inch model there, which, I mean, if you're going to be getting a 240Hz screen and an RTX 2070 and all that kind of stuff, you're probably going to be sitting at home and gaming it on your desk. You're not going to be traveling with it. Maybe with the other models you can actually get a little bit more work done because they're not as power hungry. So let me know what you guys think about this particular laptop. If you guys like this video, chuck it a like, get subscribed as always. Thank you to Gigabyte for sending this over, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers.